when I throw it up. Start twerking like.
Born in March 1900, Rufino dos Santos was a Brazilian catch wrestler, coach and referee. He left his home at a young age and without speaking a word of English, smuggled himself onto a ship to New York. Once on US soil, he found shelter at a YMCA and with it, a job and access to education. It was in the United States of America where he honed his skills as a catch wrestler and disputed more than 50 documented matches. He later joined the US Navy and was deployed to the European coast of the Mediterranean, granting him the opportunity to compete in Spain, France, Holland and England. Upon his return to the US, he graduated as a physical education teacher. He then headed back to Brazil where he continued his full-time commitment to sports, consistently teaching for different organizations, including YMCA Brazil and the Naval School where he was head of physical education. Several publications describe Rufino dos Santos as an honourable sportsman who didn't brag about his accomplishments. He served as catch wrestling coach to grappling prodigy Hugo, who went on to become the founding father of Luta Livre, a catch wrestling-based Brazilian martial art. But perhaps his greatest historical relevance comes as a competitor from his match against Carlos Gracie, patriarch of the Gracie family. Rufino dos Santos challenges the Gracies. Dos Santos was in attendance as a spectator of a Jiu-Jitsu vs Capoeira event that, according to newspapers, turned out to be a disappointment. The encounters were delayed because the Gracies argued over the use of certain Capoeira techniques, resulting in George Gracie winning his fight via disqualification. Osvaldo Gracie and Benedicto Perez both won via submission, setting the final score to 3-0 in favour of the Gracie team. Meanwhile, in the audience, Rufino dos Santos was not impressed. He was respectful of the Japanese method of grappling, but was skeptical of the Gracie's claims, like Carlos Gracie stating he could beat any man in less than 3 minutes. As soon as the third and final fight ended, the catch wrestler climbed into the ring and expressed his desire to engage in an immediate match against any of the Gracie brothers. To show his disposition to go at it right away, he removed his coat, shirt and tie. The audience cheered him as the Gracies decided to leave the arena without a response, which prompted strong criticism from the audience. During the days that followed, the Dos Santos challenge continued making headlines and Carlos Gracie decided to step forward. He issued a response to the sports journal stating he would be the one to accept the challenge. A first meeting was held to discuss the details and agree on the rules. Dos Santos presented a copy of the official Jiu-Jitsu rulebook and stated he had no problem agreeing to practically everything in there. Carlos Gracie came up with the first obstacle, saying he would not compete under those rules, but only custom ones that he would draft himself. The organisers brought to Mr. Gracie's attention the oddity in rejecting the rules of a sport he claimed to practice. He replied that he practiced a self-defense version that required special rules. Dos Santos agreed to Gracie's request, stating he was confident in the American style of grappling and therefore he had no problem facing any of the Gracies under their rules. Realising there was no further disagreement about the rules, Carlos Gracie moved to the subject of the dress code. He said, quote, "I will fight wearing the kimono and I insist Dos Santos has to fight wearing a suit and tie, just like he walks on the street." Those attending the meeting couldn't help but laugh. In response, Dos Santos had the final words for Gracie, quote, "I suspected you were afraid of me, but now I am certain. Your resources are weak, and the reason you are avoiding the challenge is you know you'll lose." The match was far from confirmed, but with an increase in media attention and more people getting involved, an agreement was finally reached as this news article states, quote, "After a great debate by the press and 1,000 demands, the match is finally set. According to the rules agreed upon, any method of grappling could be used, and the only way to lose was quitting. Additionally, a money purse was set for the winner." Dos Santos then declared that money was not his motivation, and in the case of winning, he would donate it to the Baptist hospital. He added, quote, "I really want to face one of them, the best of them, so I can prove what I stated. It seems it will finally happen." He also said he was coaching 3 capable young men, and launched a challenge in their name so they could face the other Gracies for the preliminary bouts of the event. This challenge, of course, was never answered, although his student, Manuel Lima, ended up competing and winning against another opponent. Some months later, Lima also challenged Carlos Gracie. Dos Santos said he wanted the competition to be conducted with sportsmanship and not for the purpose of creating a feud. "I just want to render Caesar the things that are Caesar's," he said. Wednesday, August 19th, 1931. With only 3 days to the event, Carlos Gracie pulled out of the match over a financial disagreement. Friday, August 21st. After another meeting, the match was back on track. Saturday, August 22nd. The awaited date finally came. The event took place at the stadium of the Fluminense Football Club with a large audience that broke the record of fight night's attendance. Carlos Gracie was 28 years old and Rufino dos Santos 31. The match resulted in Dos Santos consistently getting the better of Carlos Gracie, who behaved in an unsportsmanlike manner, left the mat twice, and finally refused to continue. A game but patient Rufino dos Santos was declared victorious. As promised, Dos Santos donated the purse money to charity. Sadly, the story doesn't end there. More than a year later, a newspaper published a letter written by Dos Santos entitled 13 Questions to Carlos Gracie, where he asked things like, "Why, a month after the match, did you request that Dr. Renato Pacheco annul the result? Why didn't you take my student's challenge? Why didn't you take any of catch wrestler Robert Ruman's repeated challenges?" and more indiscreet questions. This didn't sit too well with some of the Gracies, as this newspaper states, quote, "They didn't like the content of the letter, and instead of seeking to settle it in the ring like gentlemen, they decided to assault Mr. Dos Santos." The Gracie brothers decided to beat Dos Santos in a way they knew they could, outside the ring, 3 against 1, and using a metal tool. The official report, according to witness accounts and the testimonies of everyone involved, is the following. Tuesday, October 18th, 1932. Brothers Carlos, Helio and George Gracie planned to ambush Mr. Dos Santos in front of one of his places of work. They patiently waited in their car until Dos Santos arrived at around 8 p.m. He was about to enter the tennis club when they cowardice attacked him while his hands were still inside the pocket of his coat. The 3 brothers viciously assaulted Dos Santos. The brutal beating included the use of a metal tool carried by Helio Gracie. But this was not enough. The victim was held and immobilized so Carlos Gracie could put him in a jiu-jitsu arm lock that resulted in complete dislocation, joint rupture and separation. The Gracies left on the floor a bloodied and seriously injured Dos Santos, who sustained career-ending injuries that required surgery. According to the police report, when captured, the brothers didn't have the courage to assume responsibility for the crime. They were eventually sentenced to 2.5 years in prison. This is not the only group assault perpetrated by the Gracie brothers. They also destroyed Greco-Roman wrestler João Baldi in the same premeditated way. But on that occasion, Osvaldo Gracie joined the gang, so it was 4 against 1. Another one of their victims was their own jiu-jitsu instructor, not Maeda, but the man they were actually learning from, Donato Pires. But those are subjects for another time.